host. We're on to the segment called Freshly Pressed 981. It brings you a detailed analysis of our newspaper stories for today, Wednesday, 19th May 2021. I have Cheta Wanze as my guest in the studio. Good morning, guest analyst.
Good morning. Let me report myself. I broke the microphone.
No, you didn't.
That's why Valentine took so long to get on air.
Well, less than a few seconds there. Well, Cheta, thank you so much for your candor. And please say welcome to Divo Okori as well at Divo Okori on social media. Good morning.
Good morning, ladies. Morning, Bar.
Welcome.
Morning, Cheta. A cool new week.
Yep, for you.
How is it in you?
For you, that just tells us that that's what Monday to Wednesday.
I want to be like you when I grow up.
Sure, yeah.
Chata's handle on social media is Chicksta, CHXTA. We'll start with the story, Chata. Oh, by the way, if you want to be part of the show, we're streaming live on YouTube, so you can type Smooth FM Lagos in the search box, subscribe to our channel, and watch. Leave a comment as well on that platform. You can use WhatsApp. WhatsApp for messages 0809 444 0981, on Instagram live at Valentine Ohu, and continue sending those messages to WhatsApp as well, and Twitter at Smooth981FM with the hashtag Freshly Pressed 981. Chat our first story. I'm waiting for your arrest. Wabba Dares el-Rufai, day three. Well, technically day two of the protest that's been on in Kaduna State. What are your thoughts? They're still back and forth with the federal government, and with the federal government trying to solve the problem that's been existing.
Well, yesterday the governor of Kaduna, he tweeted it himself on his handle. He tweeted that Wabara, I say Wabba
Mm.
was
Ayuba Wabba.
was wanted along with labor leaders, and the Kaduna state government issued a press release where they, among other things, accused nurses who were going on strike of switching off oxygen tanks for babies in a hospital. Um, I find that hard to believe, and I found it instructive that they did not tell us the names of the nurses.
Mm.
I mean, not to talk of prosecuting them. Um, Now, the whole thing has gotten out of hand. The temperature has been raised, and the Labour presidents led a crowd marching towards the governor's um, residence, government house, and that crowd was attacked by thugs, and the whole thing basically fell to pieces. Now, four threads that I want to concentrate on in this Kaduna matter is first the arrogance of the state governor. The unions had served notice of strike for a while, at least 2 weeks, and rather than negotiate, he dared them. If memory serves me, on Monday the union said that there was no attempt to negotiate until just the night before. That was when somebody reached out to them, Kaduna State government. Basically, like, how do you reach out to me when I'm already in bed? That kind of stuff. I think that reaching out was essentially just to quote and unquote fulfill of all righteousness. So that people
Damage control.
no, not damage control. So that people would say, oh, at least they tried to negotiate.
Mm.
You know, that kind of stuff.
Mm.
Now, my problem with Governor Rufai is that he behaves like a man who believes that he has all the answers and that people have no choice but to bow to his superior intellect. And he's a very intelligent man. You can't take that away from him. But to be a democratic leader, to be a leader in a democratic setting, you must know how to build consensus, even with the dunces. You have to carry your people along. You don't just say, this is how it's going to be, and then expect everybody to line up. That's the first thread. Now, having said that, even Labour themselves are wrong. And I've said this on this show so many times. We It's just the civil service, both at state levels and federal levels, are overbloated, underperforming, and basically hindering on scarce resources. Yes, I see the point in their argument that okay, what about the long convoys that governors, for example, have and all the assistants and all of that? Yes, there's a point. This is why there's negotiation.
Mm.
So labor has to give way somehow. People have to be let go. But then the third thing, and this third thing is a thought experiment. Imagine if on March 28, 2015, which was the day el-Rufai was announced as governor of Kaduna that he had won, imagine if he had immediately called civil service leaders to the table, union leaders, and told them, bro, this is what I've been saying since 2009, because he has been saying publicly since 2009 that the civil service has to be rationalized. Imagine if he had called them that day. They had 2 clear months from that point till he became governor. They could have negotiated a way to train the civil service, reach an agreement, and then from day one they could have started implementing in a phased and orderly manner, not in this shock manner of suddenly with inflation at in the high double digits.
Yeah.
You suddenly put thousands of people out of job 6 years after you came in. So the problem with doing this now is that a lot has already been built up in his 6 years in office. So many people no longer look at any intentions with that this man is doing whatever he's doing with the sign of good faith. Then finally, what bothers me even more than the trust to arrest, and I find it very interesting that somebody who, when it is time for to secure the state, Ghana is one of the most volatile states. Suddenly, it's federal government that has powers, but now it's to arrest labor leaders and he's declaring them wanted. But this use of thugs to attack protesters, we saw it during EndSARS. We've seen it. It has been a trend under this particular federal government. This use of thugs to attack protesters. Those thugs are future bandits. You are empowering people who are essentially riffraff and giving them weapons to attack other people. You will not be able to take back those weapons. And then what happens on the day when those thugs don't have anything to do with those weapons?
On the other side of the conversation, Chet, I'm concerned. I understand your idea of saying, okay, you would have el-Rufai would have laid them off in parts, in little groups, and not all of them at once, like he did now. It's like putting the bandit, that violently. But even if he did let them go, in batches, what happens to them after they lose their jobs? Seeing that, they're a product of a failed system. Yes,
yeah, I was very clear. If he had started the negotiations early from the get-go, then we would have had a situation where everybody would have put heads together and known what to do. For a start, redundancy payouts should have been agreed. Right. So all the money that you have spent, all the federal allocations that you have complained about, that you spent 90% of the federal allocations on paying civil servants, all of that, at least in the early stage, would have gone towards redundancy payouts. People would have prepared for it, and then they would have been, this is what we're going to do next.
And it'd be justified.
It will be justified. It's what we're going to do next. See, one of the things that makes, and we're going into a lot of other things if we go down the road, but one of the things that makes change so difficult in this country is that we always have this habit of waiting until it is enforced, until it's a shock to the system. And when it's a shock to the system, people will react.
And he speaks so loudly to the need for more dialogue, because dialogue seems to be only represented on the pages of newspapers and not necessarily in real time.
What happens is that we are shouting at each other. We don't know how to dialogue in this country. Perhaps it's a result of many years that we spent first under colonial government and then under military. Perhaps that's the reason. But we do not know how to come to the table and everybody talking on, and we frankly.
I speak reasonably.
Yeah, we just don't have that culture. Our culture is get his way. What happens is that some people leave feeling distinctly aggrieved and then go and try to get their way through other means.
Thank you, Cheta. Divo, analysts differ on Buhari's quest for fresh 2.3 trillion naira external loan. He's borrowing up to 6.18 billion, that's the equivalent in dollars, of foreign loan. He said it's to aid in the key projects, capital infrastructure, in 6 geopolitical zones, to build the roads and some other things. He's been facing a lot of pushback, on this, saying that the country is in serious debt and mortgaging the future of the future generations. Your thoughts, please?
Well, obviously, any attempt to borrow from the majority of Nigerians would face a pushback because, as of the latest external debt, it stood at $33 billion, while the public debt stock as of December 30th, and these were figures released by the DMO, stood at about 32 billion naira. Now, he wrote a letter to the National Assembly, that's the president, requesting for them to have to approve the loan referral, okay, to finance the 5.6 trillion deficit. Now, you know, this deficit was already earmarked in the budget, uh, which was required to, you know, fund the infrastructural drive that covered critical areas like transportation, agriculture, rural development, health, education, and others. Now, just as of May, the Senate had already approved about 1.5 billion, about 995 million euros external borrowings for also various projects to support states and all of that. Now, he stated that this money will be sourced from multilateral and bilateral partners, okay, from the international capital market for the issuance of euro bonds. And you know, Nigeria's had some sort of a good history on issuance bonds because our interest rate is relatively compared to that within the world. So most times they're oversubscribed, they do well. So the question is not our inability to raise money, but does the money that's raised go to good work at the end of the day? That's question one. Now, obviously, there are debates around this move by the federal government to raise more funds through external borrowing to meet up with our budgets. And let's start from the simples, whereby why are we borrowing to meet up with our own daily expenditure, total expenditure, which to some extent the federal government has been dutiful.
But the bigger question, yes, the bigger question for me is how will they pay back?
Yes,
How are they going to pay this?
I'm getting there. That's why I said let me start from the simples.
Mm.
Now, the usual debate is that our debt to GDP ratio is low, not by the federal government, which is dependent on that least relative, I think about 25% thereabouts. That compared to other African countries, we still have the capacity to borrow more. However, the real conundrum lies in the debt to service ratio, which hits about 90%, 80, 90%, and that's basically for every 100 naira we spend or borrow.
Beyond 90%.
Yes, about 80 to 95 kobo goes to debt payments. So what you have left at the end of the day, if you don't put that into consideration, you are fighting an uphill task. And at that point, the question is where you were now asking, how do you pay back? Where's the revenue coming from? The oil receipts have reduced with recently within the past 2 years, even with the increase in price. Insecurity taking place in the market, it's had its effect, plus the pandemic with the inability for food production and even businesses to actually produce and deliver what they need to be able to raise revenue for the country. So it is a tough debate, and we'll be looking at see whether the Presidential Economic Council does speak to this effect. At the end of the day, fiscal restructuring will only fund consumption rather than production is taken so that the government can save a bit to be able to fund some of these areas without resorting to borrowing. Because what you borrow today, the children tomorrow have to pay back.
Yeah, and mortgaging as a word, I mean, it reminds me of how the banks ask you for collateral when you borrow money. I mean, what would you have as a collateral as a nation? Are we going to sell all our assets at some point? When does this stop? That's really meant to put loans to disrupt the process. Do you know that according to law, essential workers should not down tools? Do you know that even during wars, hospitals should not be shut down? Do you have a reply about me, Jata?
Well, at least you're recording this so you can play it back. I didn't say you got no sense. Yes, at best I can be accused of implying that when there's an anti-government protest to attack the protesters.
And they don't show up on their own.
They don't show up on their own. They seem to have security cover. That can't be denied. Now, having said that, the second thing with regards the essential workers not going on strike, we've had police strikes in this country recently. You see, at some point when we meet for 6 months, 8 months, in that state,
In the
thanks.
Yeah. And also recall the sort of stipends. So
Forget the every citizen. During COVID, how many things the public doing?
Thank you, Jota. Thank you, Divo. To actions on security matters and financial matters. He says, as long as the borrowed money comes from our major friend in Asia, we'll be worse off as perhaps more than 80% of these funds don't even get to the heavily discounted. I have this other one from Kaiden Magudo. It says, hello everyone, Nigeria does not, but I know you're fine though. Jota, this next story might interest you. From this day newspaper, the Inspector General of Police has launched what is called Operation Restore Peace, otherwise
We had
Operation
I've done
RP
that. We had Operation
in
Equity,
Southeast. Again,
another operation.
what I mean, new wine in old wineskin or old wine in new wineskin?
It's just it's just living proof that these people don't think. I think the first thing to point out on before I go on is that from 2016 up until November 2020, the Southeast was actually the most peaceful of the country's six geopolitical zones. There's data to prove that. I mean, in terms of attacks and killings, this is in terms of violence. Since November 2020, and you can't divorce it from when Namkano made the broadcast on October 24th, 2020, uh, urging his followers to attack the security services. Since November 2020, there have been more attacks, especially on security services. But up until April this year, the South is still ranked third behind the fourth behind the South, North Central, and Northwest in attacks on policemen. The South is the champion in this matter. It was in April that for the first time the Southeast came second on this infamous league table. Now, why is this data important? It's important because attacks on policemen, attacks on security services can stop if the population of the region is willing to help the security services.
I've been saying that. I think
Live among the people.
I think that also is
But
true
you
that they
see-
know that, because you can't rule that out, that
you can't
possibility.
rule it out, but you can't come to it conclusively. I think these nuances are important. Now, why is it important to bring out that nuance? For those who have ever gone to the Southeast by road, checkpoints have always been a source of anger, frustration, and annoyance in the region. Moving to Southeast from Lagos by road, you'll be counting them. And the funny thing, for you to know that those checkpoints are not a matter of security, when you're coming back on the outwards lane, you don't see checkpoints. It's when you are going in. Was that these checkpoints are set up to extort money? Literally, let us take from Head Bridge. You climb down from Head Bridge, coming in from Asaba Furniture, and you start seeing the checkpoints. As in, they are collecting money from you. There was a time that I was stopped at Upper Iweka in Onitsha, and then they opened my engine and they said, "Oh, this Z here is true. Your engine is fake." Of course, that problem was, and they will stop you.
You will not ask for your liquidity license.
Please. Now, a 3-year research carried out by the International Society for Civil Aviation showed that in roadside bribes in the southeast of Nigeria alone, by far the highest in any of Nigeria's geopolitical zones. And this is the real reason why the population is looking away while all of this nonsense is happening. Because the population is already hostile to the police presence. And you see, the problem with this kind of stuff, which this whole UGM thing is being done by demagogues, clearly. But the problem with this kind of stuff
You say GM, what do you mean?
unknown government. That's the euphemism. And on Friday, I moved from Owerri to Onitsha. And on social media, that there were 70 checkpoints along that stretch. There were only 2 at Ngidi in Imo State and at Ihiala in Anambra State. So for many people, it's like a relief. These people that are extorting us are gone. So an intelligent police force will also look at itself and say, what are we doing wrong that is alienating the population we are meant to serve? So that we can bring this population back to our side and root out these criminals. It's a heart and mind thing. But trying to bring people to bring force, you will only alienate the population more. How bad? Simple.
Thank you so much for that. Because there was a question to all sections of the country and not just the southeast. I guess by now you will understand the rationale behind that move and why it shouldn't, necessarily be. Reactionary motives behind the plan by the police might not necessarily be understood up to this point, although we see what the body language is saying and what the rhetoric is saying. But we should also ensure that dialogue should be the way to go, really, because what you said, Cheta, is very, very important. Empathy. empathy should go across board. Empathy should also start from the police. I mean, they said respect is reciprocal, and the way you treat people would determine whether to be your friends or not. Speaking to providing information, especially getting from the locals. The next story, Divo, from the Vanguard newspaper, Lagos government unveils 500 mini buses for intra-city transportation. This announcement was made yesterday. I saw it personally on the governor's Instagram handle, where he said that these 5,000 mini buses are to aid to boost transportation system in Lagos, first and last mile buses. The thoughts, please.
Yeah, very what I call it good news as they unleash the greater metropolitan bus scheme. As you know, the government has been looking at means and ways of improving the efficiency of transport within Lagos, being the biggest city in Nigeria and also biggest black city in the world. Now, the population of over 20 million, they obviously going to need a very robust transport system. Now, the governor released about 500 minibuses, referred to as first and last mile.
5,000.
500.
5,000 mini buses.
No, 500.
So there are 500 shuttle buses?
I'll explain.
All right.
What they have on ground is about 500 minibuses out of 5,000 that they intend as objective to meet up with. Now, that's about 10% of their goal.
That's right.
And these will serve as intercity, inner city buses that will run routes where the larger BRT buses cannot go to. Okay. Now, this was a grand plan to replace the Okadas. Okay. And although I was waiting to see whether they mentioned the tricycles, but
Exactly.
yes, the kekes.
Somebody already asked that question this morning.
Yes.
Does that include the
crime and robberies that have been attributed to them? You know, there's been a big debate over whether we need Okadas or not. Now, this will run over a 2-month experiment. Okay. Using the National Road Union Transport Workers, which I put a question mark on. They're going to reform them while they're
they have the
bringing them.
manpower, they have the net.
Yes, while they're bringing them on board in this. However, it also doesn't explain whether there's a scheme tied to it, because usually bus schemes, either you're going to have them own them at the end of the day, which keeps them well behaved, which we witnessed in South Africa at the time they held, I think, which games was that? Now, the it will kick off in 8 zones, okay, across Lagos. And what is not also said here is that will this be done in conjunction with the Okadas, meaning will it be simultaneous? And then when people begin to see the efficiency, they take the Okadas out, or will it be done abruptly? And I'm raising this now because we've seen many schemes start that just, you just throw in a new scheme without putting in the whole transition process. So that are they saying by providing this initial 500
to take over the other?
Well, the truth is, you see, the thing is, this is the challenge with the last e-hailing, both for motorcycles and even currently the ones with cars are going through some level of challenge. They need to work out how they're going to work amicably with private investors, because what we see is most times that even when you have invested based on the attendant rules, they change the goalposts at some point in the game, which has frustrated a lot of people in terms of